We're running a bit late, and I'll do everything I can to close this session at 1:30, so that you have lunch at a reasonable time, and so that we could continue our work this afternoon. One of the speakers, that is Marwan Skandar, Marwan Skandar, has sent his apologies. He fell ill this morning, so he won't be with us. There are only 3 speakers, as you see, that perhaps will shorten this session, but there will be ample time for discussion, of course. There were many references this morning to Turkey, to Cyprus, more to Cyprus than to Turkey, and perhaps both speakers from Cyprus and Turkey might amend their presentations so that they could respond to what they heard this morning, but they are entirely free to choose to do otherwise and stick to the subjects that was agreed with them. The first speaker is Ambassador Chagatai Erciyes. I got it right. He's a friend, but the name sometimes is difficult to get right. Will be speaking, giving a Turkish perspective on the regional issue of gas, the Eastern Mediterranean and the energy prospects. And he has an interest in the subject, and we were, during the break, talking about maritime law and ways by which a regional approach might help us to ease some of the difficulties we're facing here. Ambassador.
Thank you, Dr. Mitri. First of all, it's a great pleasure for me among such a distinguished panel and audience today. I congratulate and thank Institute for Palestinian Studies and his dear chairman, Dr. Mitri, for organizing this important seminar and giving me the opportunity to address to you. I'm not an oil expert, I'm not an energy expert, but I'm much of a maritime delimitation expert on the maritime borders. Before starting my presentation, allow me to say a few words about the previous panel. There was a mentioning of the agreements between Greek Cypriots with Egypt, Israel, and Lebanon. And it is true that as far as the delimitation line is concerned, the median line was adopted as a method of delimitation. But I would like to, as a maritime delimitation expert, I would like to underline that this method is not the only method in maritime delimitation, especially when it comes to the delimitation between the islands and the territorial states. So different approaches can be taken. And another second point is that in order for countries to explore and exploit their natural offshore resources, they don't need to do an EEZ agreement, because under international law, those resources under the seabed fall into the category of the continental shelf. And the continental shelf right is an inherent right of the states. They do not need to declare this right. They already have this right. EEZ relates to the water column, and it is related to the much more of fisheries. So in order for the coastal states to exercise their rights, they have to declare it. So these are two interesting point, but I think those points deserves another topic of seminar, which I would in the future like to join and elaborate more on those points. Going back to my presentation, today I will attempt to discuss how recent developments can affect or transform the energy outlook of the Eastern Mediterranean region and what Turkey's role in this picture could be. As you all know, as mentioned by the previous speakers, there have been a series of gas discoveries since 2009 off the coast of Israel, Cyprus Island, and Egypt. These discoveries have the potential both to transform the energy outlook of the resource holders and foster regional energy cooperation. They can also make the region an important potential natural gas supplier and exporter. The Eastern Mediterranean natural gas finds can simultaneously serve different purposes. Some of the resources can be used for domestic consumption, some can be exported and can contribute to the energy security of Europe, thus decrease the continent's dependence on limited suppliers, and they can also act as a catalyst for regional reconciliation. Discoveries of Gaza Marine in Palestine and Maribi in Israel fields in 2000 were followed, as you know, by Tamar and Leviathan fields of Israel and offshore Cyprus gas about a decade later, and by the discovery of the giant Zohr field of Egypt last year. Lebanon and Syria have promising exploration prospects but face serious political and commercial constraints. Among the mentioned resource holders, only Israel is producing gas today. The Gaza Marine field is a relatively small field, but given the size of Palestine and its dire need of electricity, it's a relevant energy source just off its shores. Tamar field of Israel has been a significant find, which is enough to meet present levels of Israel's demand for decades. Before the Zohr discovery, the largest offshore discovery in the Eastern Mediterranean has been the Leviathan field. Production began in Tamar in 2013. However, the far larger Leviathan, as mentioned today in the morning, was hit by a series of delays and antitrust litigation last year. Nevertheless, these issues seem to have been resolved with the recent adaptation of the development plan of the Leviathan field and the conclusion of an agreement which foresees the export of 45 BCM gas from Israel to Jordan for a period of 15 years, as you mentioned. As for offshore gas of Cyprus Island, in addition to the complexity emanating from the Cyprus problem, as well as the delimitation of maritime boundary issues from the law of the sea perspective, uncertainties also center on the ultimate size of the resource. I'm sure my Greek Cypriot colleague will elaborate in detail, but as far as I have followed, except for the so-called Aphrodite field, the findings of gas in the offshore of Cyprus Island have been poor compared to original expectations. Only after the Zohr discovery, we observe a renewed interest for the island's offshore potential. In short, the region is rich in energy resources, but cannot yet use them to create wealth for the resource holders. There have been various scenarios on how to exploit and transport these reserves to regional and international markets. However, political as well as regulatory and economic challenges have hindered the export of the gas reserves so far. The region needs to attract large sums of new investment to commercialize these resources. It's a challenging task given the current atmosphere of reduced demand, low price environment, and political uncertainties, as it was mentioned earlier. Low oil prices have a global negative impact on the oil and gas sector investments, and this will inevitably hit the shores of the Mediterranean as well. Moreover, one should as well take into account the new producers and exporters of LNG, such as the US or Mozambique or Australia, emerging as top LNG exporters. Assessing the potential competitors and their potential markets, the most relevant market for the East Mediterranean gas, including the gas in Lebanon, seems to be Europe, including Turkey. We can see that energy security is being increasingly associated with concepts such as foreign policy and national security, besides economic growth and sustainable development. On the other hand, oil and gas historically been politically changed commodities, and Eastern Mediterranean resources are not free of political obstacles either. In that respect, Israel's complicated relations with its neighbors, state of relations between Turkey and Israel, the Cyprus problem, the Syrian conflict, the political situation in Lebanon, and the delimitation of maritime boundary issues complicate the picture in our region, in the Eastern Mediterranean. As far as I will not dwell much on our well-known views on the hydrocarbon resources around the island, Cyprus Island, but needless to say, the hydrocarbon resources around the island belong to the two communities, Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots living on the island. For that reason, they should be explored and exploited on the basis of equal rights and joint decisions. Currently, there exists a positive climate on the island. The negotiations for a comprehensive settlement aiming to establish a new partnership in Cyprus have reached a final and critical phase despite the recent stalemate in Geneva, in Switzerland. In the context of the ongoing comprehensive settlement negotiations, I think this is very important, there exists a consensus between the Turkish Cypriot side and the Greek Cypriot side that after a political possible settlement, exploration and exploitation of natural resources shall be among the competencies to be exercised by the new federal government. In other words, the offshore resources should be in the competence of the new federal government to be established after the possible political settlement. Turkish Cypriots and Turkey is of the opinion that until then, unilateral actions should be avoided. Reaching a comprehensive settlement in Cyprus will not solve the problem of equitable sharing of the hydrocarbon resources, but also increase the prospects of energy investments and cooperation. To sum up, we are facing a situation where Eastern Mediterranean hydrocarbon resources can either turn to be a liability or an opportunity for the resolution of the disputes in the region. Turkey strongly believes that hydrocarbon resources could serve as a source of peace, cooperation, and welfare for the parties involved. As I mentioned this to you during the break, we believe that the hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation activities in the Eastern Mediterranean should be handled through an integrated and holistic approach, which would cover the entire region. In other words, the Eastern Mediterranean should be considered as a single basin. Obviously, the energy developments in the region will be shaped by degree of political stability, government's policies, regional relations, investment climate, and commerciality of the projects. Naturally, commercialization of the projects will require realistic evaluation. I suppose the picture seems quite different from the viewpoint of a government in the region than the viewpoint of a CEO of an energy company. Let me now explore whether it would be possible to find an optimal solution without Turkey and what role Turkey could play in terms of the Mediterranean resources. Several large-scale projects are under consideration to bring gas from Eastern Mediterranean to the markets, including the proposed pipelines from Israel and Cyprus to Egypt and Jordan to supply gas to these markets, and through Egypt's export infrastructure, this is the LNG infrastructure, to more distant markets. Other options, as I said, are building LNG export facilities in Israel or Cyprus, or building subsea pipelines to Greece or Turkey. The local energy market of the Cyprus island is too small to justify the development of the gas finds without the exports. Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian markets are not sufficiently large either. Consumption in the region is instead dominated by Egypt and Turkey. A connection to Egypt appears to be an option, but domestic output from Zohr field can soak up the demand in Egypt. Moreover, companies will most probably take into account the consequences of a highly subsidized market. From commercial standpoint, the experts indicate that transporting gas to Greece by a subsea pipeline or through building LNG terminals are somewhat distant prospects, as these are technically challenging and cost-intensive options. What could be Turkey's role for the exportation of East Med gas in the future? Before answering this question, I would like to touch upon very briefly the energy outlook of Turkey. But before going to the next slide, I made a small graphics on giving the options in detail to you based on the information that I gathered from the online sources. Going back to Turkey's energy outlook, unlike many of its neighbors, Turkey is not rich in hydrocarbon resources. Our energy import dependency is 75%, yet our economy is expandant and we starve for energy. Driven by strong population growth, urbanization and economic expansion, our energy consumption rates have more than tripled since the 1990s. Recent surveys suggest that our energy demand is expected to be doubled by 2023. We imported around 25 million tons of crude oil, and these are the countries that we import crude oil, and mostly Iraq. And we imported almost 50 billion BCM of natural gas in 2015. We have an annual energy demand increase of around 4% over the last decades, which put Turkey at the top rank among the OECD countries. Standing at the crossroads between major energy producers and consumer markets and offering short, secure, and sustainable route, Turkey is also aiming at becoming an energy hub. New projects on LNG, including FSRU and UGS, as well as new legislation are upcoming to make this goal realizable. These are in 5 points. These are the Turkey's natural gas strategy that we intend to enforce in the coming years. Of course, I mean, being an energy hub is one of them, but of course there's a long way ahead and a comprehensive homework to accomplish on our side. Our advantage geographic location, of course, functions as a connector between East and West energy suppliers and the European markets. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the emergence of new states, Turkey played a crucial role together with its partners in the implementation of two major pipelines. This is called the East-West Corridor, namely the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan crude oil and Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum natural gas pipelines, as it is shown on the map. Nowadays, Turkey, we are working on this time on bringing into life the Southern Gas Corridor. The Trans-Anatolian Natural Gas Pipeline is called TANAP, and it's one of the most important projects that we are working on now. This, the delivery of gas to Turkey will start in mid-2018 and to Europe in 2020. The pipeline can also include additional Azeri volumes plus Turkmengas. TANAP project remains our #1 priority, and we attach utmost importance to the timely realization of all components of this corridor, including the Trans-Adriatic pipeline between Greece and Italy. Currently, Turkey is important its gas supplies from Russia via two pipelines, the West Line and the Blue Stream. It is shown on the map. The contracts regarding the West Line and the Blue Stream are due by the end of 2021 and 2025 respectively. So it is not late. You mentioned that you lost the Turkish market. The Turkish market is still there, and there's a prospect that you can export the East Med gas to Turkey. There is also a popular subject. This is the Turk Stream. Regarding the Turk Stream, that's another pipeline in the Black Sea. The intergovernmental agreement was signed in last October during the margins of the World Energy Congress. This agreement is laying the legal foundation of the project and constitutes an additional step forward. The Turk Stream project is currently envisaged to consist of two parallel lines, with the first line designed for the Turkish and the second line designed for European markets. In the first phase, the focus will be on the first line, feeding the Turkish market with almost 16 BCM. The gas to be transported through this line will substitute the gas Turkey currently receives through the western route. So this is not, this new Turk Stream is not, we do not intend to get extra gas, but we will substitute the corridor coming to Turkey through Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, and Bulgaria. In conclusion, Turkey is a market with its increasing demand for natural gas and cost-effective transit country with its current and developing infrastructure seems to be the most feasible and commercially viable option for the export of offshore gas of Israel, the island of Cyprus, and Lebanon. Indeed, for Turkey striving for energy diversification, the East Med natural gas emerges as an important potential additional source. Obviously, neither Turkey's or Europe's energy demand nor the gas finds can eliminate all obstacles overnight. But despite the complex political situation and technical issues on the production and the exportation of gas resources surrounding the Eastern Mediterranean, a number of studies point to Turkey as the most viable and profitable route for the transportation of the new volumes of gas discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean. These are, I think, if you look at Turkey's consumption levels, we expect to reach the consumption of 70 BCM by 2035. And that is a huge number. That's a number enough for the EastMed gas to be exported to Turkey as well. So I think this motivates all actors in finding win-win solutions to the outstanding issues that we are having in the EastMed. To sum up, while offshore natural gas discoveries have the potential to significantly alter supply dynamics in the Eastern Mediterranean region, several outstanding issues could limit the viability of those supplies in the short term. Geopolitical developments and politics have a major effect on the energy outlook of the region. So these can affect the timing and direction of pipelines, size of fuel flows, and their role in energy systems. Let us hope that the new discoveries will produce opportunities for cooperation, partnership, and prosperity rather than new complications. Before concluding, I would like to say a few words on the case of Lebanon and its potential energy resources. 2 Turkish companies were pre-qualified for Lebanon's first offshore licensing round in 2013. Despite the ongoing delays in the process, our companies are still interested in the tender. We are hopeful that the new positive political atmosphere after the election of His Excellency President Aoun and the designation of Prime Minister Hariri will prevail and pave the way for the tender process to be reactivated. We are looking forward to the quick formation of the Lebanese government, which hopefully will take the oil and gas issues on top of its agenda.